into the agenda. Standard agenda for these, right? We're going to spend most of our time talking about the process, the simplified, expedited standard process, along with how we work through screening, and then what we work with after the projects have been connected, and talk through those processes. We'll get into some general communications here at the beginning. Mike Picard will talk about UL 1741 SB inverter requirements. And then we have our portal moment, which we've been trying to touch on in every one of our seminars to make sure we're bringing some knowledge around the portal that maybe you haven't been exposed to yet, or maybe you would potentially have questions on. So Kara will talk about that, and then we'll finish up with Q&A. I saw that Jamie did post in the chat the form that you can fill out any of your questions and send those along, and we'll address those here at the end of the meeting, or we'll address them in a Q&A doc that we'll also post on the website along with this presentation and the recording. So jumping into that, I'm going to dive into a safety message. We're going to do a little bit different type of a safety message this time, right? We've, usually we touch on the seasonality or a special safety topic within a month. Right, we're going to go in a little bit of a different direction, a little bit more of a somber type situation where we, had some of our meter workers go out on site. And we actually had a flash occur as they went to, remove a meter socket cover. This did happen on a solar installation site, which is why we're kind of bringing it up here. Luckily, no one was hurt. Right, the 2 meter workers were looking out for each other. They did talk about positioning. They did talk about the potential risks and hazards of what it is they could see versus what it is they couldn't see. Everything happened, how it was supposed to when it comes to, our see something, say something that we have here at National Grid, right? The safety conversations that we have pretty consistently about watching out for your coworkers and your neighbors and making sure that, you're talking through, right, having a good safety brief at the beginning, talking about those hazard, those things worked out well. And luckily, when they took the cover off, even though there was a flash, there was no injuries, right? There was some burns on clothing, but luckily no one was injured. And everybody was able to walk away from the incident. We bring this up here, right, because it's kind of on all of us to make sure things are safe. As you guys are performing the work you need to do on your side of the meter or your side of the PCC, it's important that everything is ticked and tied and checked, and all potential risks and hazards have been identified and mitigated as best as possible, so that when we as National Grid do show up to do our work, and whatever that is, right, whether it's line work, whether it's meter work, right, whether it's witness testing, those type of things, that we can go into that environment, into that situation, and feel confident that safety measures have been taken on any and all sides of the potential situation, right, from a customer side, and what was built, to what it is we are out there to do at that time. So again, I'll reiterate, it's sort of a good news story, right, that safety practices were followed. There were no injuries, but still there was a flash, there was an incident, and those are the type of things that we want to try to protect against going forward, right? And it takes all of us to make sure that happens. So a little bit different than barbecue safety or pool safety, right? But something that we definitely worry about here a lot at National Grid, and that's making sure that as we get into those different environments, that we're doing what we can to make them safe. But then we also are trusting and hoping that anybody who was in those environments prior to us have done everything they can to make it safe for our workers going in there. So that's the safety message for today. I will jump into, so I will present these general communications. And what these ultimately are, this is our third and final sort of scheduled seminar for the year. We don't have any more planned between November and December, as it is generally a busier time of the year for us. So I did want to take a few minutes and reiterate some of the topics that were discussed in our prior meetings here in 2022, and just make sure that we open the door. If you do have questions, now's the time, to submit that form, ask those questions, and just make sure maybe you heard it in a prior meeting but didn't quite fully understand what we were talking about, right? Is another opportunity to talk to those things. So the first thing is that all the former webinars are posted to this link here, right? Standard place, we've been keeping them there. We did move some stuff to an archive that we had done years and years ago, but everything from 2022 is posted all on the same site, so you would have access to the recordings, access to the slide decks, and the Q&A docs all in that spot. We did have a special topics webinar last month, about a month ago, right, that talked to ASO and model requirements. So just as an update to that, we have posted the reference materials, and there's a link on here. So when we send out the deck, you'll have the link to be able to get to those reference materials. So everything's posted, and that did come after we did present last month. So everything's up, good to go. And you can find that, again, slide deck, recording, posted at the above link on the updates page. National Grid requires 24/7 access to all company-owned equipment. So that's definitely, I think, there's two aspects to this. One is we start to get into the colder weather, right, and the expectation of snow and other things like that. It is important that we do have driveways cleared, walking access cleared to where some meter locations and that kind of stuff are, especially if you're expecting us, right? That having that, what we don't want is, potential sort of slip, trips, and falls type of issues, or meter workers not having access to different parts of the building because of, the various different weather potential we have getting into the colder winter months here. And the other aspect of this is that we need to be able to get past locked gates. We have a lot of situations now where there are gates that are on the National Grid side of the PCC, right? We need to be able to get our trucks up to these poles. If it's National Grid equipment, we do need access to those pieces of equipment for maintenance reasons, for testing reasons, and just being able to get through those gates is important to remember. We do have locks we can provide you, so we can double lock those gates. You can put your lock on it along with ours. If we do need access to our equipment and there is a locked gate, we will end up getting our own access, right? So whether that's cutting locks or cutting chains or moving through those gates, we do in our ISA require 24/7 access to any National Grid owned equipment. So just as you're putting those gates in, and we do understand that, where property lines are and what needs to be gated off, we understand that exists, and we're happy to provide locks of our own that we do have the keys for and would be able to come and go. So if you are looking for a lock, we can definitely get that provided to you. Just let your job owner know, and we can make arrangements to get that over. End of year reminders. So for simplified applications, right, the applications and completion docs need to be in by December 1st if you're looking for an end of year interconnection. Right, obviously just getting on before December 31st. So for a simplified application, that date is December 1st. For the expedited and standard applications that require a witness test or have a little bit more of a longer process towards interconnection. Right, we have asked for those witness test docs already this month. If you haven't submitted them this month, you got to get them in ASAP. If you are hoping for an end of year interconnection, we do need to make sure that we have time to schedule the witness test, right, and get the meter set, work through the registration, all those things that have to happen before we can issue the ATI. Right, we're running out of weeks in the year to be able to pull all that off. So we did ask for it for October 1st, but if you still have not delivered it, you're still hoping for an end of year interconnection, let us know, get that information in those witness test documentation in as soon as possible, and we'll continue to work with you towards end of year if necessary. The next one is around a 25 kW cap for net metering exemption. So this is relatively new, right? So the company obviously hasn't implemented anything because we're still awaiting department approval here at this point. So once that's finalized, right, once we get direction, we'll work to implement that. And for those of you that may be less familiar with this item, right, it increases the current net metering cap from 10 kWAC to 25 kWAC. It also allows systems that interconnected here in the last year to convert from a QF to a net meter and work from there. So it has some benefits, and as we learn more and get more direction, we'll work to implement that and be able to communicate with affected customers on what the next steps will be. Last couple here, just these are brought back in from prior meetings, right? The site as-built accuracy, incredibly important. I think for for all aspects of the project, because if we find something, during a witness test documentation review and all that work's been ultimately done up to that point, right, we will place the project on hold. We will potentially need to restudy it and understand what the changes to the equipment are. So it is important that if you do make a change, you're letting us know as soon as possible, right? We've talked, I think, earlier in this year too about the significant and moderate change document, right? So changes are allowed on the project. Certain changes are allowed, in-kind changes and other things like that. So definitely take advantage of that. Let us know. Don't let us catch it at the end of the process, because that just delays everything. And then just making sure that the as-built is what is actually built out there, right? And we don't have a discrepancy, right, between what we studied, between what we thought was being built and what was actually built, because it just causes delays there. And then the procurement delays, right? Those something that we've been dealing with since the beginning of the pandemic 2.5 years ago. Those can continue, right? Even though we're not dealing with the pandemic as heavily as we have, there's still a trickle down effect. Right, we continue to work with vendors. We continue to make sure that we do have the equipment we need, adding vendors in some cases to make sure that stockpiles and everything are where we need them to be. But we have seen procurement issues with standard type materials, poles, wires, transformers, in addition to some of the more long lead time like items, primary metering cabinets and other things like that we've run into here. So we'll obviously keep you in the loop from our perspective on any of those pieces of material that may impact your project specifically. But we do just want to make sure that everybody still realizes that there are supply chain issues and supply chain risks as we move forward on any of these projects. So those are the overall general communications. Any of those topics are up for the Q&A. So please, if you have clarifying questions, please submit those through and we'll address those at the end. But for now, I will hand it off to Mike Picaro.
All right, thank you, Will. Will, just to check, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so this slide here, we just want to go through kind of briefly what the UL 1741 certification requirements are going to be for the company going forward. Right now, we require the UL 1741 SA inverters for any inverter-based generation that's being applied. The SB certification is a newer version of that, and it will be required going forward. And we'll go over the details of that right now. So for applications that are less than 1 megawatt, any new app that is received after the first of the year is going to be required to have that SB certification at the time of submission. Any applications that are less than 1 megawatt that are received, between now and the end of the year, will still be allowing the SA certification. But anything from January 1st forward, if you're less than 1 megawatt, must have that SB from the outset. And the requirements for what you have to provide to illustrate the SB in there is the same as what you would have provided to show that you have an SA inverter. We have some details on that in our ESB and on our applications to hit page. So it's just noting it on the one line and providing the equipment data to be able to verify that. So those are the less than 1 megawatt projects. For the greater than or equal to 1 megawatt, the same rule will apply after the first of the year. We will be looking for that SB certification when you submit your application up front. For projects that are over 1 megawatt, 1 megawatt or greater, if they were received after June 1st of this year and are interconnecting after January 1st of next year, those are going to be required to have the SB certification as well. Well, they may be required. So it will be communicated to you through an impact study if that site is going to be required to have the SB certification. Primarily, this will be based on the results of if there's a transmission analysis that is associated with your application. That's where we would expect to see the requirements for SB come in. From a distribution perspective, for the most part, we will not be looking for SB certification prior to January 1st. However, from the transmission perspective, it's more likely that it may come through. So if you have any impact studies that you haven't received yet, that haven't confirmed it one way or another, it may be coming within the study that would be coming out to you before the end of the year. But we are trying to minimize the impact. We recognize the commercial availability of SB inverters and some of the challenges there. That's why mainly what the greater than 1 megawatt provision here is trying to get to is projects that will be connecting out into the future in 2023 and potentially beyond, depending on what your timeline is and system modifications are, making sure that it does have the SB inverter and we have those on the system as needed. A couple references we have at the bottom from the TSRG website is where a lot of the conversations happened around the SB requirements and how they would get factored in. There is a inverter source requirements document that's on the TSRG homepage there. We have the links at the bottom here under the reference document section. It goes into more about the SB listing and why it's something that's sought after. And also there is a IEEE 1547 subgroup that is run through the TSRG that is where the UL 1741 testing gets derived from. So as the newer versions of 1547 have come out, we continually have a subgroup there that discusses and contemplates the adoption and integration of the requirements of 1547. And that's the prior group updates from all of our quarterly meetings can be seen on the TSRG site as well, if you want to get some more background on the topic. And finally, we do have within our latest version of the ESB 756, which is our technical standard for interconnecting DG across the grid. There is some language in there about the SB requirements. It basically is summarizing or expanding on a bit more on the bullets that I have above. But if you want to look there for the specific wording, Section 4 has primarily what I have in the bullets here, but the SB type of certification is referenced several other points throughout the ESB 756. So if you want to look through there and do a search for 1741-SB, you can see every place that it's referenced and what you need to factor into your designs as you're thinking about future applications going forward. So that's pretty much it about the UL listing for right now. And again, if there are other questions, feel free to put them into the questions form, and we can address those when we get towards the end. But for right now, I think we can move on to the next section, which I'll be handing it off to Jesse to go over the simplified process review.
Good morning. Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yesenia Rosa. I'm the Simplified Process Lead here at National Grid, and I'm going to go through the simplified process with everyone this morning. On this slide, this just talks about the simplified criteria. It is a UL listed 1741 at the moment SA, which will be converted in the future, as Mike just said, to SB, inverted base systems with power ratings of 15 kW or less on a single phase service on a radial feed, or UL listed inverter based systems with power ratings of 25 kW or less on a three-phase service on a radial feed. The simplified process does not apply for non-listed inverters or other generators like the induction, synchronous, or asynchronous. Aggregate generation capacity of listed inverters that exceed the above mentioned limits, or projects that do not pass the simplified process screenings. Next slide, please. On this slide, it just talks about the process steps, right? You submit your application, then the next step is your conditional approval. After that would be your completion document submittal, and then once that's reviewed, you have you get your authority to interconnect, right? If you do have a Mass Smart system at conditional approval, your service upgrade form becomes available. So we do like to advise the developers, right, to fill out that service upgrade form as soon as you get that conditional approval, because that will ensure that you get that work order number in time for your inspection. Next slide, please. This slide just talks about the path and the time frames allowed for this path. First and foremost, you submit your case. It gets acknowledged pretty much immediately, but we do have 3 business days. The application goes in for review. We have 10 days for that. And then it goes through the screening process. Depending on the screen that it needs, it may go between 15 and 30 days for the simplified process. If you don't have to go be moved to expedited, then it goes right into the conditional approval. And then you have your completion document review, where you submit your completion documents, and we review that within 10 business days. And then in some cases, we do require witness tests, but that is only if applicable on a simplified case. If you choose to e-sign a case, keep in mind that case does stay in draft status until that application is signed by the customer. Next slide, please. Some common holds and concerns throughout the process for simplified. During the application, please remember to always enter your KWAC size at the triage correctly. We want to ensure that your case goes via the correct path, so that is determined by the size that you enter in that KWAC field when you are submitting your case. If there is an existing system, please do enter this information while you're submitting your case at the triage stage of that submittal. The application and the case must match the customer's bill account, the name, the address, the account number, and the meter number. All as they are listed on the bill should be listed the same way on the documents. The customer billing account should be up to date and all obligations met and or cleared. All AC coupled storage should be noted on the application in the same section as the inverter. This is not required for DC coupled storage, but AC coupled storage is required for that information be listed there. Ensure that the hold reasons are being addressed before resubmitting your case. When a case is placed on hold, if the hold is not addressed and you resubmit that case, it is just causing us to put it on hold again, and then creating a delay for both, your installation and the customer as well. Multiple application roles are being submitted on the cases a lot. So we do want to make sure that you do enter your roles, just one role for each role needed. So if you have a net metering case, the roles that are needed are your developer role, your application owner role, your billing customer, and your system owner. And then if you have a Mass Smart installation, then we do require the electrician role also be entered in that application role section of the case. After conditional approval, this is when your service upgrade form becomes enabled for Mass Smart cases. Just ensure that you go in there, you complete that upgrade form at that time. This will make sure that we then give you that work order number in a timely manner, right? And you're able to obtain that work order number and have it ready for the inspection. If you don't fill out this form, when you have the conditional approval and you wait to submit your completion documents, you're just delaying the process for our meter installation and for the customer to receive the ATI, because we are now getting that work order number to you then at the time of reviewing the completion documents. So we do, like to advise developers to go in there and try to complete that form at conditional approval or soon after. If the system changes or there's a change of any kind due to whatever was already proposed and your original approval, please do enter a change review. We will go over the change review process in a couple of slides. Next slide, please. The conditional approval continuing here, the initial application should be for the desired system size. Request to increase the system size after the conditional approval will require a new transformer check, and it may result in the withdrawal of your simplified case with a new application required under the expedited process to then determine the system modifications. So very important, if submit your application for the desired system size, there are many instances where due to saturation, the case may end up going down the expedited path if you do increase that size later on in the process. And if there's a change in the account, meter size, or design, as I mentioned, you enter in that change review. For the completion documents, have that work order inspection cleared before you submit your completion documents. This will ensure that once your completion documents are submitted, we review them. If there are no discrepancies on your forms, then there's no reason for a hold. That inspection is already cleared. Ensure that the mass smart socket for mass smart systems is wired correctly with the line on top, load on bottom. The mass smart socket should always be wired this way. And then the meter sockets are not allowed to be used as junction boxes, so just make a note of that. And equipment adapters in the meter sockets are not allowed. So at no time should there be an equipment adapter installed in a meter socket with a national grid meter will be set. You could use them, but it has to be only on a customer-owned socket, and it has to be labeled as such. If the case started as Mass Smart and then removed, a change review must be entered so that we can update the case accordingly, and we would also be refunding that Mass Smart fee if that change review is entered before interconnection. Expansions of the interconnected Mass Smart project are not allowed per the Mass Smart tariff. However, the DOER can provide an exemption. So if needed, you would go to the DOER. We do have some situations where we are UTC in meters because the wiring to the meter is not correct. So our case shows that the meter number is, or the solar system is tied to one meter number, but then when we go out there, the solar system is actually tied to another meter number. So if this is a situation that you guys come across, please do let us know. Enter a change review on your case before we get to the meter installation, and that way there we can make sure that we're installing the meter on the correct in the correct socket. We do get a lot of UTC meters as well for missing a fifth terminal. So beware that any three-phase service does require a fifth terminal meter socket. So if you go out to a premise and it is a three-phase service, their utility socket isn't a fifth terminal, and you're adding solar, you must update that utility meter socket to be a fifth terminal meter socket, as well as your Mass Smart socket should be a fifth terminal socket. And then just ensure, as Will had mentioned earlier, that there's a clear path to your meter sockets and there are no trees, bushes, or anything blocking that meter. Next slide, please. On this slide, we'll go over change reviews and some reasons and the process, right? So some reasons for your change review would include system size, design change, name changes, account change, whether the account becomes finalized or a new owner comes in, a different meter to be tied to the solar, you're adding MassMart on a case that started off as net metering, or you're removing MassMart on a case that started as MassMart, but now just going with net metering. And then this process would consist of the developer entering in the change review on the case. I do suggest chatting the case. That way we can immediately be notified via that chatter. And then what we do is we'll go into that case, we'll review why you're making the changes, we'll open up the appropriate forms, and then we'll chatter you and let you know that the forms have been opened up. Then you go in and submit your revised documents. At that time, we'll review those revised documents, and if we need to, we'll countersign the application and resend that conditional approval. Next slide, please. Some concerns after the case is interconnected. Some main concerns are that a case is existing net metering and you wanted it to be a smart case. So now we're changing it to a smart case after it's already been interconnected as net metering. This is only allowed for cases that have been operational since or on or after January 1st, 2018, and you must obtain and provide evidence of the statement of qualification from the DOER that you've been approved for MassMart on that case. Chatter the case with the note that you want to convert this to a MassMart project. We'll open up the forms and let you know that you need to add the electrician rolls, make the smart fee payment, and then fill out that service upgrade form to have the inspection cleared. Once those steps are completed, then we'll be able to send for a MassMart meter order. If you're removing MassMart from a case that's already been interconnected, then we would need an email from the customer letting us know that they are removing themselves from the MassMart program, most likely already have a letter from ClearResult saying that they've withdrawn from the MassMart program, so they can also send that over. And then once you send that or the customer sends the email over, we'll go ahead, open up the appropriate forms so that we can update your one line, your application to remove MassMart from everything and update the case. And then we would go out there, remove the MassMart meter socket, the meter. And it is definitely up to the developer and customer to have that meter socket rewired for a customer-owned meter or removed. And then when you wire it to the wrong meter socket, if you've noticed this before our meter workers have, please do chat the case, let us know, and then we'll go through the process and steps to update the case with the correct meter number. Next slide, please. This slide talks about the inspection. In some instances, you'll have 2 work orders. This is because you have a MassMart work order and you may have a revamp or an upgrade work order. Please ensure that both are cleared by the inspector. All work order inspections are tied to the customer's account. So when we're reviewing the COC, we verify the inspection is cleared on the customer's bill account. If that inspection is not cleared, we cannot order a meter. And then I did put on this slide the phone number and the email where the inspector can send his clearances to. And then you do have the option of viewing your work order numbers on your case under the related tab. And that's what that diagram shows right there. Next slide, please. Common questions and concerns for residential storage. Both the solar and AC coupled storage are included in the system size when determining if a system will be simplified or expedited. The storage is not included in the size for the net metering eligibility. So for example, if you have a 10 kW single phase system with a 7 kW AC storage, it would follow expedited process because the total kW AC size is 17, but it would still fall under net metering eligibility because that inverter is 10 kW. In mass storage with net metering, solar that charges from the grid cannot export to the grid. So just ensure that your one line indicates how you're charging and discharging your storage. If the system is participating in MassMart, all generation must be captured by the MassMart meter, and the system should not be installed so it does not backfeed when the grid is down. It should be. Next slide, please. When we have to move a case from simplified to expedited, if during the infrastructure review is determined that the proposed system will exceed the recommended electrical capacity of the service transformer, you will most likely have two options. You may have the option to reduce the system size to be within the capacity remaining on that transformer, or submit a new expedited application under the expedited process. The expedited process includes a more comprehensive technical review. The technical review may identify national grid system modifications that are required to interconnect your system. The cost of the system modifications are the responsibility of the interconnecting customer, and the system modification cost cannot be determined until the case is reviewed via the expedited path. So there's no way for us to really provide like a quote before that case is reviewed via the expedited path. Next slide, please. Some process reminders when entering your size at the triage part. Remember to enter in your KWAC total size. For simplified cases, we have created a list of contacts. You could search this in the portal. If you enter in chatter guidance or how to chatter, and the links are also here on this slide, it'll get you to a guidance document for the simplified team where you can chatter a representative based on your case status and your question. Another reminder is to enter in your change review for any changes that are made to the case or the applicant or the application. If you're enrolled in MassSmart, don't forget that that process continues through ClearResult. So you would have to continue with the ClearResult portal to submit the W-9 ACH banking information for the customer so that they can get their MassSmart incentives. All the inspections on the account must be cleared. And if you have any billing issues, credit allocations, or connected customer aftercare, please enter a post-interconnection inquiry. Once you enter this inquiry, the DR aftercare team will get that inquiry and they will work with you on resolving your issue. And I believe that's the end of my slides, and I will pass it off to JJ to review the screening process.
Thank you, Jesse. Quick mic check. Am I loud and clear?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be covering the pre-app application and screening review processes for all of you this morning. We're going to begin with pre-apps, which are required for any proposed system 250 kW or greater, with associated fees that are listed here in the table per the MADPU 3.2. All pre-apps are finalized within 10 business days, and for us to finalize a pre-application report, it includes 4 pieces of information that you need to provide, which is the site location address, the aggregate system size, the generation type that you are proposing to interconnect, and some kind of a screenshot from a web mapping platform like Google Maps, Bing Maps, Town Assessors Maps, anything that we can kind of determine where the site is. The completed pre-application report provides feeder circuit information, the substation that you're interconnecting to, phases available in the area, if that area is in a network or non-network area, some potential system constraints. At the end, there's a large application checklist. It also includes the connected and pending aggregate DG on that feeder, and whether or not the application is going to fall in an area that has an ongoing ASO or group study. Next slide, please. These next few slides are screenshots of a finalized pre-app report. Sorry that they're a little tough to see, had to shrink them to fit, but that first page on the left is where the feeder and circuit information is going to be displayed with the site location, and then any substation information or aggregate feeder information. The second page to the right is where all of the additional notes are going to be about the distribution system in that area, and those notes can include anything like any ongoing ASO studies, potential system constraints, challenges that the interconnection could face, if any distribution system impact study is going to be required depending on the system size, if the proposed project is located in a group study area. And this is all information that we provide so that you can make a better determination on whether you would like to apply with your project or not, and progress to the application stage. Next slide, please. The third page of the pre-application report has a bunch of useful links, including our standards for interconnection, our electrical installation standards, NCAP portal, and a bunch of other useful links when applying for interconnection. Next slide, please. The last 3 pages of the pre-application report have the application checklist. It's a very detailed checklist, and it outlines what forms and documents are required for each type of project. It's also organized by size and generation type. So like CHP requires, some things that an expedited case wouldn't. It also details where in the tariff or in our electrical standards bulletins you can find any additional details for that required document. By doing a nice review of this list when you're applying for interconnection, it helps prevent a lot of holds moving forward. Next slide, please. Once the pre-application is reviewed and accepted for those larger projects, and the developer decides that they want to move forward with application, and you provide all of the applications and upload them to the correct forms in the portal, we go through the application review process, which is for every single project that's going to require screening. So that can include some simplified projects that get bumped up to expedited, and all standard projects. So for applications, all submissions require a complete application form, application fee, billing account number, system size, some equipment assets, the account location, site plan line diagram, site control documentation, text sheets, and the legal information document. And then for the larger projects, additional forms are required, like any curtailment letters if the inverter output is going to be curtailed or derated, any anti-islanding forms for projects that are going to be moving down the standard path, UL certificates, any low rejection over voltage letters, ESS if there's storage involved, and all of those documents and where you can find them are all in the detailed app review checklist. Next slide, please. This outlines some of the most commonly missing items that lead to application holds. A lot of them are document discrepancies between either the legal information form or the application form where the information isn't correct on one of them, or some of the account numbers don't match up. Missing a construction work request number, which is required for almost every single case that requires any work, whether it's swapping a meter or new distribution system construction, anti-islanding forms, curtailment letter for derating. Some of the things that get line diagrams put on hold are like the internal DG protective settings that aren't labeled on the one line, missing a electrical PE stamp. Some of the things that you can be missing on the site plan are the POI or the PCC, company pole nearest the location. Sometimes if you have a site that could be located in an intersection, we don't really know where you're trying to interconnect to. There could be multiple feeders. That's why that information is kind of important. And then access roads all need to be 20 feet wide for necessary clearance requirements for all sites. Next slide, please. So the company will not provide transformers larger than 300 kVA or when primary metering is the least cost to serve option for system configurations. All commercial meters and disconnects need to be grouped together. And then that'll be finalized with operations on site before construction. Existing metering located on any pad mounted transformers will be required to be relocated when applying for new standalone DG systems off of that same transformer. If you're running a parallel set, new MA Smart meter installations require disconnecting means on both line and load side of the meter. MA Smart systems over 500 kW must be co-located with an energy source system that meets the requirements for an energy storage adder. Basically, any smart system larger than 500 kW needs storage. All final metering locations will be determined by the metering department and will be based upon existing service configurations. Any expedited cases that need further study will need all the documentation required for standard projects. So if you have a smaller case that's 100 kW that could get conditional approval but is attempting to interconnect in a challenging area and needs to progress to the standard path, all of those same documents will be required of that case. And then no work should begin until metering department has approved final disconnect and metering locations on site with the electrician and the people that are building the system. Next slide, please. Once the application review is finalized, it progresses to screening. Screening is required for all escalated and standard path projects. During the screening review, we determine if project can interconnect without requiring another or detailed study or further study for any projects in the expedited path that aren't in an area with any ongoing studies. For projects larger than 250 kW that are going to require further study, the screening review takes a detailed look at the proposed system configuration, area, and system infrastructure to provide corrections or feedback to developers before progressing projects. During the screening review, we also check if the project is on a radio network system, if the equipment is UL 1741 SB listed, and does that proposed DG on the system pass substation backfeed and non-ending screenings. If any of those screening checkpoints fail, we may require further study before providing an interconnection service agreement. Other reasons that projects under 250 kW could require further study are that they could be proposing to interconnect in a challenging area, in an area with an ongoing group study, and then those projects will need to progress down the standard path. Most 4 kV projects, any projects interconnecting onto a 4 kV feeder, typically require further study due to the limitations we have on those feeders. And then every project proposing to interconnect to a network or non-effectively grounded feeder will require further study. Next slide, please. These are some of the potential system constraints that lead to further study that I just went over. Ongoing area studies or group studies, challenging feeders, lack of hosting capacity, if there's a feeder reconfiguration going on. Underground feeders, non-effectively grounded feeders, HT lines, any planned substation work in an area, over feeder saturation, and then DG penetration. Next slide, please. These next few slides are just screenshots of a finalized screening memo. First page is laid out in a few sections, with the top section showing the proposed project and site information. The next section details whether the project is going to require further study or not. If the project does not require further study, that will say no study required, and then this project could progress to conditional approval or supplemental review. If the project requires further study and is progressing outside of a group study to an impact study, this section is going to include an estimate. And then the last section includes the feeder information, substation information, and total amount of proposed and interconnected DG on that feeder and substation. Next slide, please. The second page of the screening memo details the specific project configuration and proposed equipment that's going to be provided by the utility and the customer. It also includes general site requirements, any additional requirements that could be requested as the project progresses to the standard process. All the notes in this section are going to vary depending on the project type, size, and configuration. So depending on if it's a secondary, primary interconnection, it's all going to vary on the project. And the final section on this page provides the screening review notes outlining how the project is going to be progressing, including some impact or group study project information and the screening results of this project. Next slide, please. The third page on the screening memo outlines the proposed generating equipment that the system intends to utilize, and below are also the general requirements for utilizing UL 1741 SB certified generation equipment. The only exception to that would be a CHP or a fuel cell interconnection project, which doesn't utilize those types of inverters. And then there's some more information here about complying with the tariff and National Grid's ESBs. Next slide, please. And then the last page of the screening memo contains the links to the MADG website, our electrical specifications and standards websites, our stakeholder information website where you can actually find all of these slides, updated meeting information, and updated study information. After the last page of the screening memo, and once the screening is finalized, the approved site plan and one line diagram for this project get appended to the screening memo. We then upload it to the portal, and an email is sent out to the application owner in the portal with the finalized report containing all this information. This then gets progressed to the expedited team for conditional approval or supplemental review, or if it's going down the standard path, it gets progressed to the complex team. And that's all I have for pre-app, app, and the screening process. I'm going to hand this over to Mark Dre to go over the expedited process.
Thanks, JJ. Can you just confirm my audio is being heard?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm going to just walk us through the expedited review process. Again, just talking through the criteria that lands an application in the expedited path. Single phase customers with listed single phase inverter-based systems with power ratings of greater than 15 kW on a radial feed, or three-phase customers with listed three-phase inverter-based systems with power ratings of greater than 25 kW on a radial feed, or any project that did not pass the simplified process screens, non-simplified projects that do not require an impact study. The maximum size supplemental review is based on the review of the screens. And just a reminder that you must be using the DPU 1468 forms when submitting application and closeout packages. And a lot of what you've already seen and heard in the simplified section of this presentation can be reviewed for concerns and questions that would have the same impact on residential systems that fall into the expedited process. Next slide, please. So the process steps are a pre-application if it's 250 kW or greater. Be submitting the expedited version of the application form. Would be then going through an engineering review and possibly a supplemental review. Then we'd move to the ISA or Interconnection Service Agreement to go ahead and construct the system. If required, then the company construction would occur, where applicable, a witness test, and then the submission of the completion documents where they'd be reviewed and approved, the meters ordered and set, followed by the authorization to interconnect. Next slide, please. Again, similar to the screen you saw in the simplified path, just showing you I won't go through each of these, but just showing you the time frame that's allocated for each of the steps in the process, from acknowledging receipt of the application all the way through to the end. Next slide, please. Some common errors that we've seen in application packages that hopefully we can highlight and cut down on them. The legal information document quite often is submitted without being completely filled out. We do need that completely filled out. The one-line diagram is required to have an electrical PE stamp. If there is a battery included in the project, we want to ensure that the application reflects this equipment. Again, as noted earlier, we want to make sure that that storage, charging, and discharging capability note is on the one-line diagram. And just a reminder, when your case status is in conditional approval delivered pending customer decision, meaning we have issued the ISA, please don't hit the finalize submission button in the portal unless you have uploaded the signed ISA. Next slide, please. And then some errors that we see quite common in completion document submission. For most expedited applications, a commissioning memo on a company letterhead must be provided or is provided in lieu of the witness test. And the commissioning test should consist of at least the following: the 2-second shutdown when the disconnect open test, 5-minute before restart when disconnect is closed test, confirm the system matches the as-built, and list the inverter relay frequency and trip time settings. Next slide. Again, reminder that the as-built must be PE stamped and signed and dated by the person that performed the commissioning test, with the signature date matching the date of the test. With respect to the completion the completion picture package, the meter picture should show permanent plaque visible at the eye level that includes a warning about the generator that's been installed. If the AC utility disconnect switch is not grouped with and adjacent to the utility revenue meter, then a permanent plaque visible at eye level that clearly identifies the location of the AC utility disconnect is required. Next slide, please. Evidence of insurance is required for all projects greater than 60 kW in Massachusetts. Facilities that are between 10 kW and 100 kW, but not class 1 net metered eligible, do require insurance. You can please refer to the ISA and the interconnection tariff for insurance requirements. With respect to qualifying facility documents, you must submit Schedule A P-rate form for all QF projects. And for projects that are greater than 60 kW, also would be submitting the W9 ACH supplier enrollment form and the asset registration. Next slide, please. Just some reminders with respect to metering. No equipment or adapters between the meter and the socket or in a meter socket. Meter sockets are not allowed to be used as junction boxes. Projects greater than 60 kW in Massachusetts require interval metering, wireless or phone line. Make sure that the test meter is removed from the generation meter socket. Company needs a 4G wireless signal test on a Verizon network in order to provide wireless metering. Phone lines must be dedicated and terminated at the meter location. The line must be 100% copper. Fiber lines will not communicate properly. These meters are long lead time items, and prep time can be 10 to 12 weeks. So it's important to work through this with your job owner well in advance of when you intend to seek the authority to interconnect. And you can find the wireless test form at the link noted here at the bottom of the page. And I believe that concludes presentation of Expedited. We'll pass it off now to Taylor.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. So my name is Taylor Jerome. I do help oversee most of the administrative and time management tasks throughout the group study process. But today I'll be speaking to the standard review process. Next slide. Okay, so there's a specific criteria that is put into place for projects throughout the standard process. These requirements include project sizes greater than 500 kW, anything that requires distribution impact study and or substation system modifications, any non-listed inverter or generators other than PV, such as induction, synchronous, or asynchronous, most CHP systems, and then any project that did not qualify for simplified or expedited process. Next slide. So there is a number of steps that are followed to make up the interconnection process. First, there is the pre-application, followed by the application submission. And then this is the point within the process where the application is identified as a standard application. Next is the engineering review, which includes the impact study or detailed study, if applicable. Once the study finalizes, the project moves into conditional approval, and at this point, an interconnection service agreement is delivered. From here, the project moves forward to design, and so this is where design and documentation associated with pre-construction requirements, such as permitting, easements, et cetera, would be completed. Following that would be construction. Once construction as well as any necessary inspections have been completed, the project will move forward to witness test and completion documents. A successful witness test will be followed by meter installation and asset registration. And lastly, the project would be granted ATI, the authority to interconnect. And then at the bottom of this slide, you can also access a link, which will bring you to a more detailed process description. Next slide. So on this slide, I'll discuss the timelines that are associated throughout the standard review path. The receipt of application will be acknowledged within 3 days. The application will be reviewed for completeness within 10 business days. And then there are 20 business days allowed for initial review and 5 days to send an impact study agreement. Impact studies are typically allowed 55 to 60 days, but that can differ on a more complex project or where mutually agreed upon timelines have been decided on. Complete detailed studies, if applicable, typically are allowed 30 to 60 days, or again with a mutually agreed upon timeline. An executable ISA will be delivered within 15 days, and the total maximum days that you could expect will range from 135, 160 if expedited, or 200 plus for standard complex. And construction schedules vary because they're project specific, and witness test will be scheduled within 10 days from the company's approval of witness test documents or by mutual agreement. And then those results will be delivered within 5 days. Next slide. So on this slide, I'll talk about some important information to keep in mind throughout the entirety of the standard review path. So first, the impact study or detailed study will determine the electrical impact on the company's EPS with the required system modifications and associated costs. Projects that are greater than 1 megawatt will be presented to ISO New England at the 20 business day point of the study, and will be placed on an ASO hold, either until ISO New England provides approval or the ASO study completes. Project size is based on nameplate rating of the system and can be aggregated. Applications that are greater than 1 megawatt but less than 5 megawatts and does not require a full transmission study will require a GNF. While applications that are greater than or equal to 5 megawatts and or do require a full transmission study will require PPA and supporting transmission proposed plan application. In cases where substation modifications are required, study timelines would allow for 60 business days. If estimated construction costs exceed 1 million, then the study timeline can be by mutual agreement, and in either case, this information is shared as part of the 20 business day review. The ISA is provided after the study completes and will have the estimated construction timelines. If a detailed study is required, the customer can request an early ISA, but this would not have a construction schedule included. The first kayak payment is due within 60 business days, and the 30 business day cure periods are no longer allowed. Once payment has been received, design will kick off, which is where the details of system modifications is determined. Easements, permitting, right-of-way, et cetera, are required before proceeding to construction. And if third parties do not agree to the design, then it can result in a restudy or redesign. Next slide. So on this slide are some more reminders relating to the witness test and completion documents. So the most recent checklist can be found on our NCAP portal by clicking on the link that's provided here within the first bullet. Documents can be approved in advance, but they must all be submitted before the review can begin. And then just as another reminder, don't hesitate to reach out to your account manager with any questions that you may have at any point throughout the process. So with the witness test documents, they must include pictures of the nameplates, and in order to schedule a witness test, all checklist requirements must be approved, and both National Grid and customer construction must be completed at that point. Specific to compliance documents, asset registration is required, and National Grid applies for asset registration on behalf of the customer, which typically takes 5 to 10 business days. All incentive projects greater than 60 kW do require asset registration with ISO ahead of ATI because we can't backdate payments. Behind the meter, class 2 and 3 net metering and demand response systems are exempt from being registered as a settlement only generator with ISO. And lastly, if AC battery standalone system is generating power to the grid, then they need to be registered separately with ISO. Next slide. So moving on to document revisions and restudy reminders. First, all changes are made to site plans in one line should be clouded, and the revision block should be updated to include revision numbers and date. One lines and site plans are also required to be PE stamped. If changes are made after the study has finalized, then customers need to inform National Grid of changes via the change request button on the portal and provide revised documents to determine if a restudy would be necessary. The restudy would have associated costs and timelines. Restudies can cause impacts to projects' costs and timelines, even if the scope of work does not change. And prior to submitting a change, we encourage that you reference the moderate and significant change document, which is also referenced here on the slide. And lastly, in cases where an ISA has already been executed, the company's redesign and construction process may be put on hold for the duration of the restudy and until an ISA amendment has been fully executed. Reevaluation of construction schedule may be necessary and will be determined after full execution of the respective amendment. Next slide. So here we have some important dates to keep in mind. If you're going to be requesting end of year interconnection, we suggest submitting your proposed witness procedures and energization plan along with any other witness test documents available as soon as possible. And then this should also include your wireless meter test form or meter phone number as applicable. So by November 15th, construction should be complete and all documentation should be submitted. And then just a couple reminders here that witness test requirements were updated as of May 2020, and that all completion documentation must be submitted prior to review with images properly labeled in their proper forms within the portal. Next slide. So meeting the target dates that we just discussed does not guarantee end of year interconnection for your facility. However, it does give the company a better opportunity to meet your request. The target dates have been established based on the company's experience with delays to end of year processing, which include any necessary engineering reviews, subsequent reviews, and communications with interconnecting customer, queuing and resource allocation for both witness testing, scheduling, and meter installations, fewer processing delays due to state holidays and weather conditions, and required registration with ISO New England for projects that are over 1 megawatt, and customer delays in getting that process started. Please keep in mind that customer cooperating and planning is essential to the process. The company will not issue ATI until the customer has satisfied all requirements and the required company meter has been installed. Additional information and resources to assist you in the process can be found using the link that is provided at the bottom of the slide here. And as always, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your job owner for your project. Next slide. Okay, now shifting a little bit to the group study process. On this slide, we have a link to our group study order for reference. Each group member is encouraged to review the group study provisions to understand the full scope of the process and requirements throughout the group study. The company will always provide visibility and communication in accordance with the tariff. And then group members are responsible to understand their individual responsibilities and process tasks that may require group consensus. Next slide. So here I can provide a high-level summary of timelines that are associated with group study. So our group windows are opened, and once they're open, they'll be open for 40 business days. They cannot exceed those 40 business days, but they can be closed sooner than the 40 business days in accordance with the group study order. We hold a scoping meeting within 20 business days of all of the completed screens. And typically the scoping meeting is just to discuss the high-level overviews of what we're seeing as impacts and introduces the group study process. And it also provides a place to ask and answer any questions that might arise. Once a scoping meeting is held, group members will have 10 business days to notify the company as to whether they wish to proceed or not. And then within 2 business days after the expiration of that milestone, the company will ask those group members that express their intent to proceed whether or not they wish to opt into the extended group study process or proceed with the regular group study timeline. So an extended group study timeline, it offers a refined study estimate and it does expand the timeline. And then once we get answers from all potential members relative to the extended group study or the expiration of that 5 business timeline, we then will issue invoices and the group study agreements to all potential members within 15 business days. And then we would expect group members to execute those agreements and submit payments within 15 business days. After we receive completed agreements and payments for group study, depending on the number of applications and potential system modification costs, you could fall into one of the 3 buckets in terms of study duration, which are shown here. 100 business days, 125 business days, or 160 business days. Next slide. So continuing on with group study timelines, the company has determined points within the process to deliver a preliminary assessment, which is to discuss the high-level impacts and associated thresholds. So these preliminary assessments will come somewhere around the 40 business day, 50 business day, or 60 business days. That is depending on the total scope of the study. It's also important to note that these dates are approximate and they can vary depending on complexity. So sometime after the preliminary assessment, we can expect an ASO study to begin where one is required. At this point, the distribution study is placed on hold during the duration of the ASO study. And then once the ASO study does complete, the balance of the distribution analysis can come off of hold and proceed until completion. And then once completed, study reports are delivered, including document revisions that are required to proceed to receive an ISA. Once the impact study reports have been delivered, group members are given 15 business days to identify their intent to proceed to receiving an ISA and address any document deficiencies that are required. At this point, if a group member needs more time, then they would need to, again, request an extension by submitting an extension request within Portal and include with that unanimous consent. Once document revisions and intent to proceed have been delivered to the company can now begin drafting the ISAs. And timelines for drafting ISAs are dependent on the length of the study. Once ISAs have been delivered, customers are then given 20 business days to sign and return the ISA. And then lastly, anything beyond the delivery and the return of the ISA will follow the regular tariff MADPU 1468 timelines. Next slide. So on this slide, we include a couple of reference points relative to group study. So we do have a group study status map that's uploaded on our system data portal. There's a link included on this slide here as well. So you would locate the map just by clicking on the link and then clicking into the tab that's labeled group study status. And then we have a number of other useful resources uploaded to our Interconnection documents webpage. This includes a group study FAQ document, group study change request form, a how-to document on viewing other group study participants within a group. And then we have a more recent how-to document on requesting an extension request, as well as the group study extension request form that you would need to document group consent. Next slide. So once you have clicked the extension request button on your case page, a group study extension request form will populate. The form will look like what is shown here on the slide. You'll need to enter the number of extension days that you're requesting, as well as the reason for the extension request. So for example, here this would indicate that a group member wishes to extend the payment timeline by 10 days. And also required would be to upload the extension request document with the unanimous consent, which you would be able to locate by clicking the link that is provided at the bottom of the form. Next slide. So here on this slide is what an extension request unanimous consent form would look like. So this is what would need to be completed and uploaded to the extension request form that's within the portal. And then again, if there's any confusion, we encourage you to utilize the how-to document that's provided on the Interconnection Documents webpage, which will walk you through step-by-step on how to request an extension. But if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or your job owner. And I think that's all that I have. Next slide. So I'll hand off to Roseanne to discuss connected customer support.
Thank you, Taylor, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Roseanne Matero-Dumas, and I'm here to give you an overview of the DER Customer Support Group and the portal where we can find information, submit forms. So first, I just want to let you know the DER Customer Support Group, Distributed Energy Resources, and we are part of the Customer Energy Integration Department, also known as CEI. Our vision is to make it as easy to be a customer with connected distributed resources as it is to be a traditional National Grid customer. And our purpose is to prepare National Grid for a time when more than half of our customers have DER equipment or participate in a DER incentive program. Our goals are the customer portal support, managing and improving user experience in the National Grid Customer Application Portal, the NCAP portal that you may be familiar with, and the connected customer support portion of the team, managing and improving business customers, hosting connected DER equipment, and or participating in DER incentive programs. Next slide, please. Connected customer requests. So who can submit a connected customer request? The system owner, also as the interconnecting customer, the host customer, retail billing account holder for the host site or of the facility, and other parties who are designated by the system owner or the host customer in writing to manage their credit allocations or to act as a 24/7 on-site emergency contact. So how do I know if my project is connected? And that is a common question. Many people come in through their application and they feel that because they have the solar panels on their roof that they're just about ready to be connected or they're a connected customer. So there is more criteria than that, of course. So just because the panels are on your roof, it doesn't mean that the project is in fact connected. If your application case has received authority to interconnect and all of the following apply, then you will be considered a connected customer. So the project has been fully registered if required with ISO. A first bill on the host account with net metering or a smart AOBC credits that were correctly allocated to all satellite billing accounts per the initial request. The refund or invoice for reconciling system modification costs has been paid. After all of the above criteria has been met, support would be handled by the DER Connected Customer Group. That would be the group that I'm speaking on behalf of today. Exceptions: if you're replacing or adding equipment to your site, you need to submit a new application with the existing equipment clearly marked on the line diagram. Next slide, please. So this brings us to submitting a DG inquiry to National Grid. If you go to the website ngus.tfaforms.net/79, that's a direct hit. And that is where you can check the post interconnection pages for information about your questions or requests. If you click on Contact Us after choosing your location, whether it's Massachusetts or New York, you can open up a DG inquiry form. Step 3 would be provide all available information, including attachments, and click Submit. Step 4, receive an email confirming your submission. And 5, National Grid will process your request and or answer your questions. So it really is as simple as when you do have an inquiry, to go to the portal, select your region, select Contact Us, fill out the questionnaire, state your inquiry, attach any pages that you want. You'll be assigned a portal case number, and then we will answer your request. Next slide, please. So where to find allocation change forms? You would go to ngus.force.com/s, direct hit for you. And then you would click on Post Interconnection after you've chosen your region, Massachusetts or New York. Next slide, please. Where to find allocation change forms? Click on Massachusetts Post Interconnection, and then click on Massachusetts Credit Allocation Change Request or Inquiry. Next slide, please. Allocation change requests. So our forms have changed over the past couple of years a bit. We have the Schedule Z form for simple residential customers and the one-time transfer forms. Actually, there's a one-time transfer form for a single request, and then there's a one-time transfer form for multiple transfers on the same request. Also for net metering complex customers, you'll find Schedule Z forms, the Schedule Z Excel spreadsheet, a one-time transfer form, the account removal form, and the swap form. For Mass Smart net metered customers, there's the Schedule Z form and the Schedule Z Excel form. And for Mass Smart AOBC customers, alternative on bill credit customers, as you may know them, you can find the form to fill out and submit as well. Schedule Z and AOBC allocation changes can be submitted up to 4 times per calendar year each. And next slide, please. So the Schedule Z form versus the one-time transfer form. Schedule Z can be updated up to 4 times per calendar year, as I just mentioned, to change the allocation of excess generated credits on your account. So this is for credits of the future. So this is to change future allocations. You would use the Schedule Z form. Requests are made by a percentage, which will be based on the generation per month. Please be sure to choose how you would like your net metering credits allocated by selecting one of the options in section E on page 2. On page 3 is where you'll be providing your designation by percentage allocation. And on 4 is where you would sign and date the form. And also, please remember to initial the bottom of all 4 pages because not all of the information on the forms needs to be filled out, but we do want you to acknowledge that you've read through the whole form by initialing at the bottom of each of them. And then for one-time transfer requests, which are different than the Schedule Z, and they are separate forms for the past year now. So if you'd like to transfer an existing credit from your host account to other accounts on a one-time basis that meet the load zone requirement and be transferred to a National Grid electric account only. So we can only transfer to a National Grid electric account, not to your National Grid gas account. It does have to be an active account, and it has to meet the load zone requirement. The request needs to be made in a dollar amount versus a percentage, up to the available amount at the time that you're processing the request. So if you want to transfer $150 from your account to someone else's account, but you have $130 on the account available at this time, your request may be rejected unless you check off a portion of the form that says up to this amount. And then, of course, a signature and a date are required. Next slide, please. So these are some of the options for portal case inquiries. There's a drop-down menu. So when you're entering your portal case inquiry, you have an option of the category, which can make it more specific for us to find your category for when we're working our requests. So they are DG billing inquiries, such as why I haven't received my bill, why I'm getting multiple bills, I don't see my incentive credits. The next category would be credit allocation inquiries. How do I change my allocations? I don't know my meter number. Why haven't the transfers gone out? Can I get a transfer history? The next category, transfer of ownership. Um, there are different processes for each types of transfer of ownership. So whether you are the billing customer or the owner of the system, um, there are different forms that you may need to fill out. So we do have knowledge pages for that. Another category is power quality and high voltage, and you would submit requests like, I would like to expand my system. What are the next steps? We are seeing constant spikes in our data. Our generation is not matching your generation. Our project is tripping offline several times a week. There's also a category for credit allocation change requests, the ones we just talked about, Schedule Z and one-time transfer forms. And then other post interconnection inquiries. I need to update my mailing address. I'd like to add this to my billing portal. And then in some instances, system terminations and decommission systems. So those are the categories that you can select from from our drop-down menu when you're choosing your topic for your portal case inquiry. Next page, please. And that concludes our portion of the webinar for DER Connected Customer Support. And I'd like to introduce to you Kara, who will be discussing e-sign enhancements.
Thanks so much. Hello and good morning. Next slide, please. So today we are going to talk about the ability to e-sign your application, and these are just some important steps that we are going to go over today. Next slide, please. So in order to be able to submit your application and e-sign it, these are the steps that you need to follow. So you first want to make sure that your asset details are filled in. And in order to do that, you're going to want to hover over the wrench next to the application, and then a drop-down will appear, and you want to choose Equipment Selector. Next slide, please. When you do that, this window is going to pop up for you, and you'll want to fill in all of the required information. Make sure you input both the generator and the storage selections for your application. Next slide, please. Another issue that you will want to make sure that you have addressed before you try to submit your application and e-sign it is to make sure that you have an account number. If you have an existing account number, you can utilize that. It needs to be active. If you require a new account number, perhaps you are building this at a location that's never had service before, you'll want to reach out to customer service at 1-800-260-0054, extension 2. And request an account number for new service. Make sure that all required forms are in draft status. You will not be able to submit an application if the required forms are in new status. So you want to make sure that you've addressed all of those forms. If the required box isn't checked, then you don't have to worry about that. That's not a required form. Next slide, please. Then once you have all of that information correctly updated in your application, you will want to hover over the wrench again for the application and select e-sign. And if you're filling out a Schedule Z, you will want to do the exact same process for the Schedule Z. Next slide, please. At this point, you will see the Finalize Submission button turn green, and you will be able to submit your application. Next slide, please. And then you're going to receive an email. You'll definitely want to check your inbox and your spam folder in case your inbox didn't recognize the email. It's going to come from Customer Application Portal, echosign@echosign.com. So please make note of that. It's not going to be coming from National Grid. It is echosign.com. From the email, you'll want to click on the Review and Sign, and this will take you directly to the eSign secure website. Next slide, please. And when you open up your application to sign, this is the view you're going to see. So you want to click on the yellow Start tab, and that's going to take you to each section that needs to be addressed by you. You'll want to fill in the information that it's requesting of you, and then continue to hit that yellow button. Next slide, please. When you reach the end, the application will ask you how you want to sign your signature. You can type it in and choose a font style. You can draw it if you have a screen that will recognize your finger. You can upload an image, and you can also use your phone. Next slide, please. That will input your signature in the interconnecting customer line, and then you'll want to enter your title, whatever that may be. It could be a business title, or it could be something as simple as owner. And then you'll want to click the bottom blue button that says click to sign. Next slide, please. Congratulations! Now you can submit your applications even faster. This is what the screen is going to look like when you have completed this process correctly. These slides will go out after the meeting, so if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please feel free to reach out to portal support with the link below. Thank you.
So this is Will again, just jumping back in here for questions. We are a little bit over, so if you only allowed or allocated an hour and a half for this, we apologize for going over. We will be again posting the slide deck, the recording, hopefully in the next day or so, and then following on with the Q&A document that could follow within a week or two getting posted. So if you don't have time to stick around for the Q&A, then it will be posted and we'll get that sent out. But I'm going to quickly dive in the Q&A right now and start working through that. We will we'll work through all the questions hopefully over the next 15 minutes or so, and we'll wrap up at that point. But thanks for everyone who's stuck with us till now. So with that, I will start working through. The first one I'll take. A couple of questions around 2075, docket 2075. It says, please review how interconnection cost allocation will work for projects currently in queue in light of the termination of DPU 2075, right? So, so the DPU in moving on from 2075 in light of some of the new federal acts that just came about in the recent months, right? They did talk to the company and give us the opportunity to still submit a SIP for review and approval within what was the 2075 pilot area, which is the central Western Mass area. So if everybody remembers correctly, we were only working under a pilot only for the group studies and other work that was happening in central Western Mass. So we do have the ability to complete the studies that we had identified potential SIPs for. So once those are completed, we will review and determine if they meet the criteria to have a SIP submitted to the DPU. We are currently going through one of those processes for Shutesbury right now. And I think we have 3 more potential SIPs lined up. And I say that because we have not determined if they meet the criteria yet or not. If they do, we'll submit them to the DPU for review. But otherwise, 2075 is closed. You know, we are currently having internal discussions as a company on what the 2022, Climate Act will impact on, future cost allocation and what that looks like. So we don't have a clear answer to what it looks like going forward. But right now we do plan on, finishing what we started in the 2075 pilot area. And we'll see what comes of that once those studies are complete. So next one, JJ, I'm going to tee you up for this one. It says, can you please go over the battery only interconnection process and if the customer already has an existing system?
Sure. So if you are applying for a storage adder or to add storage to any existing system, it'll go down the typical path through the interconnection process. We need to review any kind of new site plan in one line that shows and encompasses the storage system. For products over 500 kW, it's going to require engineering to do a detailed analysis to determine how it's going to affect the feeder that you're proposing to interconnect and discharge to. For storage, interconnecting onto existing systems, if it's DC coupled, it's usually easier because the output of the system, if it's already been studied, if it's already interconnected and it's not going to affect anything, they'll just need to determine when the proposed discharging of those batteries will look like on the system. So that's why it needs further studying to go through the typical process. Well, I'm going to also take the one for simplified storage as well. There's also a question here about when applying storage for a simplified or expedited project residential, how does that get progressed? And it'll be the same. It'll run through the expedited path. We will verify if it's DC coupled, and if it's not going to export more than what it was already approved for, we're going to verify all the documents match up with the system. The site plan and the one-line diagram have to be updated to reflect storage on site. And then if you've already been interconnected and the system's already been running and there's not going to be any change in output, then we would provide conditional approval with an updated ISA.
Thank you, JJ. So Mike, tee up for the next one. It's how can we be part of the TSRG? And I assume the developer community being the we.
I think Mike had to hop off. So Mike is the chair for the TSRG, and he can put you on that list. You can reach out to him at his National Grid email, which is michael.picaro@nationalgrid.com. And we're going to post in the Q&A the additional information that can be found on the TSRG website, so that you can review any information that you want to know about the TSRG.
Thanks for stepping in on that one, JJ. So Kara, I think this next one is yours. It's a couple of questions here, so I'll read them both and you can grab them both. It's, Mass has passed systems above 10 kW. Will the portal, and the other one is when will the portal documents reflect 1468 forms rather than the 1320 forms?
Great questions. So we are currently pushing through the 1468 updates. If you are filling out an application and you see a form that is not updated, please reach out to us with the Contact Us button, and we can provide you the current manual workaround for that. but those forms should be updated within the next couple of months as we progress through our update process. And then as far as the 10 kW, when will the portal reflect this? This is in our backlog currently, but it has been prioritized. And as soon as our resources free up, we will assign it and have it implemented.
Okay, thank you. Jesse, this one is how and where can we hear or get updated about the 25 kW AC cap exemption increase?
Yeah, thanks, Will. We're currently waiting for the guidance from the Mass DPU and an order from the Mass DPU. Once we get more guidance and orders from them, then we'll be able to communicate that forward to all developers, most likely in a mass email, as we typically send our communications.
Thank you. And I'll keep you on the hot seat here, just around the end of reminders. So it says to have simplified applications in by December 1st. What happens to the application submitted after December 1st?
Applications that are submitted after December 1st are going to go through the normal process. If the application is submitted, on December 1st or after, we may not have enough time to get it to the ATI stage. But it's more important for the completion documents, right? If you have a case that's already been conditionally approved and you've installed, get those completion documents in so we could get that meter installed by December 31st.
And then do you have any more around what the process will be going from a QF to a net meter?
So currently we don't have any more information on what that process is. It is going to be an internal process. And when we do have more information, then we'll make sure to communicate that forward to, developers and customers that would be affected from that.
Good, thank you. JJ, you're back up. It says, is an ESS required if the solar size is over 500 kWac?
Yes, per the 225 CMR 20.6 and the regulations, if you have an MA smart system that is above 500 kW, you do need that storage. You do need a storage coupled to that system, only if it's an MA smart system. If it's any kind of QF or behind the meter project for above 500 kW, that storage is not required.
Thank you. So the next one I will take. So the question is, are there standard right-of-way widths required for feeder connections to new sites, and do these vary by circuit voltage? So I'm going to assume that what we're talking about when we say right-of-way widths, we're talking about access roads on specific sites, right? And the answer is yes, right? It's a 20-foot width is what we're looking for as part of the ESB and what our standard is looking for. That is to, we have very large bucket trucks, right, that we need to get down these roads, but also because we have to set the truck up to do work that requires us to put out the outriggers and to make sure that that is on flat area, and to be able to work safely on the pole, right from the bucket truck on the road. So there are other standards that go along with that, right? It has to be less than an 8% grade because we obviously can't be, setting the truck up on a hill and working out of the bucket. With that, it doesn't have to be paved, but it does have to be a gravel road. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, around 24/7 access, right? So we just need to make sure that the road itself is maintained for any sort of weather, right? Or water washing out parts of the road, potholes, those type of things, right? There are some expectations. We will post as part of the Q&A a link to the ESB where you can find those specific specs on the access road itself. With respect to voltage, that is not, the road width is not dependent on the circuit voltage itself, but depending on the voltage, we are required to maintain certain minimum approach distances when working on the wires that may have effect in veg management and tree trimming, not specifically on the road width itself, but the voltage would potentially have an impact when it comes to tree trimming and making sure that we have the space we need to do our work. The next question, Jamie, you're up on this one. It says, in the standard process, if a project is over 1 megawatt, does it automatically need an ASO or group study and take significantly longer to get an ISA?
Yep. Can you hear me, Will?
Yes.
Perfect. So the short answer is no, it's not automatic. But for projects greater than 1 megawatt, it really depends on the area your project is interconnecting to for both types of study, both ASO and group. If an ASO study has taken place in that area in the past, it's assumed that an ASO study will be needed in that area moving forward for any incoming project. I would say the same applies for group study as well. But that being said, with the increase of DG interconnected as well as NRQ, it's significantly more common nowadays for a project greater than 1 megawatt to need an ASO study as well as a group study. And I also want to mention that projects less than 1 megawatt also will be in a group study as well. But I just also, for the group study map that Taylor mentioned previously, that's a good resource to look at if you want to see what we have going on for group studies at the moment, as well as ASO studies within the group study. And then we have an ASO updates page that is going to be included in the links in this slide as well, that show ongoing ASO studies, anticipated ASO studies, previous ASO studies as well. So it will give you a better idea if your project will need either of those.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yep.
All right, couple questions left and we'll let everybody go. JJ, you're up for this one. Is there a specific way we need to be applying for battery only interconnection on the portal for under 10 kW residential projects? Any specific forms needed? How does it differ from the normal solar system interconnection process?
So if the storage is going to be interconnecting to the grid, it'll be following the same typical simplified or expedited process. They'll enter the assets in the portal like they normally do, but instead of a generator asset, they'll do it as an AC power producing storage asset. And then we'll review all the documents and determine any system modifications that are going to be required if the system is going to be discharging and charging from the grid.
And last question is just, are there SB inverters currently listed in the portal? So I do not believe that they are listed in the portal as of yet. But I will take that away and we will update the Q&A doc with a for sure yes or no to that question, but I do not know that off the top of my head. But with that, that was the last question that we had submitted. So I will thank everybody for their time today. And obviously, if you have other questions and you have projects in queue, you have contacts to your specific job owners, please feel free to discuss those questions with them. We will also keep this form open for a little while to have additional questions submitted. And if you're able to get those in, we will try to include them in the Q&A doc when we post it. So if you're thinking of something later on today, by all means, submit it back into that form and we'll do our best to address it. Other than that, I appreciate the presenters and I appreciate everybody taking the time to spend with us today. Have a great end of year as we work into the holiday seasons and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.